Beyond the Bell, Exploring Education in the Bangor School Department, a Bangor School Department podcast.
Welcome to Beyond the Bell, the Bangor School Department podcast where we explore important topics in education and our community. I'm Dr. Marie Robinson, Superintendent of the Bangor School Department.
And I'm Sara Luciano, member of the Bangor School Committee. On our last episode, we had the pleasure of speaking with Leanne Larson from the Department of Education, who shared insights on how purposeful play can enhance education outcomes. Today, we'll dive deeper into that topic with two amazing educators who are making purposeful play part of their classroom instruction. Joining us are Emily Robinson, pre-K teacher at Vine Street School, and Sarah Cousins, music teacher at James F. Dowdy School. Welcome, Emily and Sarah.
Thank you for having us.
Excited to be here.
Thank you both. Emily, as a pre-K teacher, can you talk a little bit about how you incorporate purposeful play into your classroom activities?
Sure. So for me, purposeful play means creating an environment where children can learn through exploration and creativity. So in my classroom, we set up themed play stations and centers. So for example, we have a grocery store or a veterinary hospital encouraging kids to play and interact. We have an art center and a block center. This not only sparks their imagination, but it also teaches skills that we're working on.
That sounds wonderful. How do you assess whether those activities are meeting educational outcomes?
So by observing the children during their play, we can do that. And I look for ways to engage them with each other and with the materials. I take notes on their interactions and their problem-solving skills. I also involve parents by sharing updates on their child's development, and that creates partnerships that go beyond the classroom.
In music education, purposeful play allows students to explore music using instruments, rhythms, melodies, and in a fun and engaging way. Sometimes students will just create their own songs, but we're working on these specific chords with ukulele. Other times we're working on what is a melody in piano, and so the students will create their own and also do ones that I give as an example for them to try, and then they can explore it and go above and beyond what I'm asking them to do, as well as sometimes using technology to create their projects as well.
Those are really fantastic methods to incorporate play in the learning day. And I think it's really important to highlight what both of you have shared is that it's opening up opportunities for enhanced creativity, communication, developing those interpersonal skills, all great things that we want kids to be able to do. Can you talk a little bit about how you ensure that your students are getting that balance between structured learning and free play? Sarah, can you talk a little bit about that?
An example that I can use is I just used in the classroom the other day is we are working on note values and what they look like and how long notes are held for. And then we played a game where the students were playing a card game and they had to use those values and recognize the notes and then go back and forth. So they had to teamwork, problem solve at the same time. There's no technology this time involved, but it allowed them to work on recognizing the notes, recognizing the values, and then playing and communicating with one another. And then I'll use technology in a different way where they can say, okay, here's your framework, but then I want you to explore.
I love the balance of the structure and the freedom. I think that's wonderful. Emily, a couple of questions, just one to start out with. When you think about purposeful play, can you talk about what it means to you and how do you feel? Is it essential for pre-K students?
So it's all about learning through discovery, and children at this age are naturally curious, and purposeful play channels that curiosity into learning. So I think it's very essential for children to be able to interact with each other and to use their own imagination and their own creativity. And it's part of what I do is incorporate the lessons and the curriculum into that play so that they think it's play, but it's actually they're picking up skills that we're working on and want them to learn.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Thank you.
So what specific play-based activities do you use in your classroom? Could you share a few examples?
Sure. So we have several centers or activities around the room that students engage in after we've sort of taught a lesson or gone through a part of the curriculum, and then they go to different stations or centers throughout the classroom. We do have a puppet theater, we have a dramatic play center, a block center, an art center. So just different stations based around the room that incorporate the topic that we've been working on. For example, recently we did a unit on fairy tales and folk tales, and so in our puppet theater were Three Billy Goes Gruff, all the puppets were there, Three Little Pigs, and they were able to retell the stories. And it's really fun to see them come up with their own ideas as well. We read different versions of all of those stories, and it was really fun to see which versions they sort of incorporated in the puppet theater, and also if they came up with their own. We also have a science center and a STEM activity, and we were talking about when we read Goldilocks. Actually, when we read The Gingerbread Man, we were talking about how the gingerbread man had to hop on the fox's back, and what if he came to the water and there was a boat there? Could he have escaped? And so students had to use materials that we had to build a boat, and then we had little cutout gingerbread men. So they built boats, they put their gingerbread man on the boats that they created, and we floated them in the water to see if they actually would get across the water. So incorporating what we've been doing with STEM activities and with materials that we're using into them was really fun play.
That is really fantastic. I was just visualizing the boats, and I'm sorry I missed that event. It sounds wonderful. The boats and the little gingerbread people. I think that what you've shared is really a highlight of how we can, use that structured learning time to expose children to the learning, but then giving that structured play or free play so that they can really grapple with the learning, and then it deepens that learning, right? Because so many times we want to rush to the next thing, and that doesn't allow for the learning to really deepen. And I think the opportunities that you are providing for students with the puppet theater, that is just so critical. I mean, we really recognize that communication skills and interpersonal skills, again, just really important. So giving our pre-K students that opportunity is just wonderful. I really, really think it's amazing, all of this that's happening in pre-K. I know you talked a little bit about the methods that you use to assess the student progress. Is there anything different? It almost sounds a little bit like a performance-based assessment, because, you're really observing, you're taking notes, really like that deep observation that allows you to know, and you've been a teacher a long time, so I think that helps to really understand, yes, the child is learning, and how do I demonstrate that? And so is there any more that you can share about that in terms of observations and notes and assessment?
Sure. I think another example that we right now are talking about animals in winter, and there is one center in our science area that has a lot of loose parts, and there are animals and loose parts. And so students are creating habitats for animals, and then I go over and ask them what they've created, sort of some open-ended questions, and what animal is there. So if they've created a cave, what animal is there? And then, this happened just yesterday. I said, well, does that animal hibernate? Or are they adapting to winter? Or are they migrating? And using checklists to see if they've understood the concepts that we've been teaching. And so I can see what they've created, and then I can also ask deeper questions about, what they've made, and use checklists in that type of thing to sort of document progress. And I also write a lot of notes just about the conversations that they've had, or can they go further with their thinking and their conversations. Sometimes it's a checklist. If we have letters, hidden in a sensory bin, can they pull those out and tell me? So I'll use checklists to sort of check off which ones they know. Or so there are some note-taking, some observations, some conversations to document their success.
That's great. That's great. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
How do your activities promote social skills and cooperation among students? Could you share an example of how conflict resolution is handled during play?
Sure. I feel like that changes as the year goes on. Sort of in the beginning part of the year, I'm a little bit more involved in modeling. I always get down on the students' level, meet them eye to eye, and then listen to both sides of the story. I really like them to look at each other because the conflict is between them. And so just sort of guiding them to have respectful conversations with each other, to talk about what happened, get each other's perspective, talk about how they're feeling about it, and tell the other one if they don't like that, or how could they make it better, and see if just by coaching them, they can come up with a resolution. I feel like at this point in the year, it's really fun to sit back and just wait to see if they resolve their conflicts on their own before I have to step in or before they invite me in. And sometimes I'll say, have you talked with your friend about that? And if they haven't, then I'll say, do you want to try that without me? And then I might go over and sort of help them.
That's great. Thank you. So I'm going to move on to you, Sara. It's your turn now. What types of activities do you incorporate into your lessons to facilitate purposeful play?
I give, in our about 40-minute period that we have, they'll have their first instruction of going over the main topic of the day. And then I always give them a good 10 to 15 minutes of, here's where I want you to focus, but you can have some choice in that too, so that they're not always playing the same song. So my room may sound chaotic, especially during ukuleles, but the students are able to work together and partner, like, hey, let's play this chord song together, or I want to write my own song. So they're still focusing on the same concepts, but they're having a lot of freedom to differentiate their needs. I also have some students that have never had ukulele before because they moved in from a different district. So I also try to meet them where they're at, where they may be in an 8th grade group that have had me for 3 years, so that they don't feel like they've fallen behind because they haven't had that experience. So a lot of the times I'll have multi-leveled examples for them to play through, and I feel like the choice helps with that play as well.
I love that we have 2 different examples, middle school music and pre-K, because sometimes people feel as though the purposeful play needs to stop at a certain age. And I think what we're highlighting here is that it really doesn't. And when you talk about the creating, the spontaneous music compositions, it's just such an amazing way for kids to, utilize their brains in a different way, as opposed to sitting down and think and hearing like, okay, what's the lesson about? What am I supposed to do? They are the ones that are generating that. And I think that is so critical for our students. So thank you again for that work. You talked a little bit about this earlier in terms of technology, and it sounds like you really balance the technology so they're not using it 100% of the time. But can you talk about how the technology enhances the learning experience for middle schoolers?
So we have a lot of different levels of learners, but you also have a lot of different types of learners. You have your hands-on learners, the verbal, and so I find that through technology, I've been able to strengthen those students that are super creative but love the digital age. And so we may be working on our piano unit, and they need to code out the notes of the piano so we can play it using Play-Doh instead of just playing it on actual keyboard. But they're still showing me that they understand what the note sounds like. There's even in the Scratch program that we were using, and it's an actual digital piano, so they can show me where that note is. And then when they play their song, does that sound like, let's say we're trying to do hot cross buns. Does that sound like hot cross buns? No, I coded the wrong note. So it allows students to also shine in their strengths, and then I can also see where maybe they are struggling, but if they can still show me they understand, it doesn't always have to look the same.
And I think I'm just going to interject one other piece that I think is really important for our listeners and everyone to recognize, is that purposeful play provides an opportunity for natural differentiation. So I hear from both of you that you're really meeting students where they are, and I think that's so critical because we know that kids are coming in at all different levels, and this provides them with an opportunity that is joyful and also allows them to progress at their own pace.
And I think the other part of that for me is that I pair students in groups at different centers, and it gives them role models. So you might have one student who's really good at imaginative play and somebody else who isn't, and they're hearing language from their peers. So they're actually picking up a lot of those skills, that they maybe haven't learned at home either. They're picking those up from their peers.
That's amazing. And, learning from one another is critical and a really powerful instructional strategy. Thank you.
And going back to what you were saying about, middle school kids and thinking that play needs to stop, these kids need to move and play and differentiate even more so sometimes, I think, than even the littles, because they're still kids too. And they want to learn, they want to have fun, and they want to enjoy what they're doing. And these are some other ways that you can really tap into those skills.
That's great. And I would even extend it and say, as adults, we need to remember to play, right? And have fun and be joyful. So great. Thank you.
We already covered this a little bit, but are there any other methods you use to integrate purposeful play into your existing curriculum, Sara? Are there examples you could provide outside of the ones you already have? Those were really amazing.
I also try to incorporate some bookets and gimkits into what we're doing. They're kind of like a trivia game. It allows students to try the game modes that they're in, but they're answering questions on the topic we either are working on that day or that week. Other ways is using worksheets where kids are creating music and then sharing with one another. And also I have some games that are just like good old-fashioned board games for like built around chutes and ladders, but it's ukulele chords and they have to move across the board and work that way as well.
Great, thank you.
That's fantastic. And I know there is a lot of, I don't have the current research right now, but I know there's research to support that children learn quicker through play than any other strategy. So that's great. Emily, I'd like to just talk a little bit about the lasting benefits that you have observed. And actually, this question could be for both of you. Any lasting benefits that you've observed in your students as they're engaging in that purposeful play?
I think conversations, and like I had just mentioned, learning from their peers about how to use their imagination or just enhancing their conversation, that, talking back and forth, sharing materials, they're doing all of that while they're playing. And I think those are, skills that they need to use as they, or to continue to have or grow as they grow into being adults. How to resolve conflicts, how to share materials, how to get along in a group. All of those types of things are happening when we're in our activity centers or play centers. So I think that those are all good skills that they need to take with them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I see a lot of leadership. Some kids that they might hold back in another class. I see leadership in them in my class, conflict resolution, and a lot of problem solving, and building relationships. Some students who have a core group might actually branch out within this class because they are separated from sometimes the groups they're with throughout the day. So they're building new relationships with others and also working together, maybe not with students that they're comfortable with, but they learn how to work through those situations because we all have to learn that even as we get into adulthood.
Absolutely. Thank you. As we wrap up, I would love to hear what advice you would give to educators who are really interested in incorporating more purposeful play, but they're just not quite sure where to start.
So I think starting small, picking one center or one activity that you might be able to integrate play into that lesson and how to make it fun and more joyful. Reflect on what your students enjoy and build from there, and then be able to assess your outcomes and be flexible.
Yeah, I think about what you love, and I go with music because that's my passion, but think about what you love about music and then how could you reformat in a different way? And then from there, it seems like you just snowball. And that's kind of like how technology worked for me. I tried one class, I tried one example, and I was like, oh, this Soundtrap was a good example of what I used. And I ran with it and I saw the kids light up. So, okay, maybe you get your feet wet and then you try something more and then it kind of snowballs from there.
And I can imagine with that type of a classroom environment, you might then, maybe at pre-K, but especially at middle school level, have kids generating oh, can we, and they're coming to you with ideas. Does that happen at both of your levels?
Yeah, I have kids that will recommend songs that they want to try, or can we try a project doing this? Or you said we could do this theme for our song on Soundtrap, but could I actually go this way? And I'm like, absolutely, you're the composer. I want to see where you're going. I'm just giving you the framework, but you're the one that's actually making the music.
I love that.
I see that too, and students will sometimes go home and carry over some of the lessons that we're working on and then bring material back in and ask to share it or to show their peers or to use it in the classroom. So there's definitely that carryover piece and the excitement that gets built and carried over.
That's great.
Thank you both for sharing your insights. It's inspiring to see how purposeful play is making such a difference in students' education.
And thank you to our listeners for joining us today. Stay tuned for our next episode of Beyond the Bell, where we'll explore even more innovative teaching methods. Thanks, everyone.